Here we are today on the Northern Gravel Pit. The aim today is to show you how I would tackle a large still water. We're going to bank fish. We've got no access to a boat on this particular water. And first I'm going to try and explain why we've chosen to fish here and why we are fishing in the manner that we are. The first and most important thing on this particular water, which is some 40 acres in extent, is that previous fishing trips had indicated that the bulk of the food fish of the pike, fry and roach up to about 4 or 5 ounces, are all gathered in this particular area. The previous trips hadn't produced anything of any size, so by a process of elimination we are hoping that the bigger fish are in this area. Today with me I've got Bob Baldock as a guest. Bob's fishing just along the bank, and we're both covering an area which, as I said, has got a lot of fry and small roach in it. So far today things haven't gone particularly well. We don't know whether it's the weather, because it's been bitterly cold overnight. We've had 3 nights of hard frost, and we were lucky to find a place not frozen over this morning. But despite that, I think Bob's got one.
Nicely marked fish, 3 or 4 pounds. And a cold start to the morning, but we might get 1 or 2 like this. Slip it back. Stole him. Oh, that's it.
As I was saying before I was so rudely interrupted by Bob getting a pike, this wasn't part of the plan that we had. We were supposed to be just sitting here talking about what we were going to do, but Bob got a fish, so it's chaos as we all went up there to try and capture it on film. But anyway, we're back here now, and it has been a bit of a desperate day so far. As you can hear, I've brought the crew to the noisiest place I could possibly find. We have a railway running down one side of the place, main road down the other, and the RAF are up there somewhere playing Gulf War just to keep things, really noisy. But despite that, the pit we're on is actually a very, very nice water. The water is crystal clear. It ranges from 16 feet down to as deep as 38 feet. And the pike on here have no real preference at the moment for any, so that's the reason why we're chucking just about everything at them in order to find out which is the best method on the day. The beauty of pike fishing is that you can make it as complicated or as simple as you like. Personally, I've always been one for keeping things simple. And on the water that we're on today, we're demonstrating bank fishing techniques, which is something you can apply on the majority of waters in this country. And then at the end of the video, we're going to do some work on a trout reservoir, which is not a type of water that most people actually fish, but it is where the future of pike fishing probably lies. The lake itself is a fairly new gravel pit. It's perhaps about 10 years old, and one of the attractions about it is the clarity of the water. As you look into the water, you'll see a whole proliferation of different types of weed, which is an encouraging sign. It has milfoil, Potamogeton, Canadian pondweed, and also the most attractive weed, as far as I'm concerned, when you're pike fishing, is the mare's tail, the weed that's most predominant on the Norfolk Broads. Now, depth-wise, it's very varied. I haven't fished this particular pit very much, so I'm only just getting to know it myself this season. But depth-wise, when we did the sonar of it, way down there at the end of the pit, it's only 6 foot deep. But as you come further back this way, it goes down to about 38. The vast majority of the pit is 16 to 18. But it really is up and down in places. There are some lovely features here. Many are out of range of the bank, but seeing as we're bank fishing, we're rather stuck with that. And the actual swim that I'm fishing here, as we said earlier, the main reason is because of the fry that I gathered here. The main features of this swim here is it is a corner where fish are herded into. It's fairly uniform in depth. It's only about 15 to 16 feet deep here, but it is very weedy in the margins, and as you go further out, there is a plateau further out in the swim, which I could just about reach with a long-range rod. So there's all sorts of features which pike can use to ambush other prey fish, which is the most important thing for a pike, is to actually be able to get an easy meal. Now, we're fishing with 3 rods here. The reason for that is on each rod is a different presentation or a different bait. Pike fishing can be slow enough as it is without tying your hands behind your back. So where you can, it pays to fish in this manner. The actual rods here are spaced at about 10-yard intervals, as you can see. And again, there's a reason behind this. There's one school of thought that suggests that you should have all the rods in front of you, and another that suggests you have them spaced out. With the rods spaced at 10-yard intervals, I can avoid the problems that you get when your rods are close together, which is basically fish going over lines and causing all sorts of terrible tangles and knitting in the margins. Now, the rod at the end there, which is about 20 yards from where I'm sitting now, if I get a run now, I can get to it in time to strike immediately and hook a fish cleanly. Some people spread the rods out far too much, and anything beyond this sort of distance really is unacceptable. Now, the rod that I've got in front of me here is set up with the simplest of pike fishing methods, really. It's the time-honoured ledgered deadbait. You can ledger a deadbait like a moron. You can ledger a deadbait in a very sensible way. The key to good pike fishing is good bite indication. And what I've got down here that I'm going to show you is very simple, but does the job. There's lots of different indicators that you can use for pike fishing. It's not my brief here to advertise for other people. I'm using what I've got here today, and it works very well. Here is a Daiwa Centratron. There's a whole range of different type indicators like this. The big advantage with this one is that you can adjust the sensitivity control via a little dial here, thus avoiding bleeps caused by wind and when you paternostering live bait by the action of the bait. Simplicity itself, the time-honoured drop-off bobbin, just clipped on there. This is the simplest sort that you can get. It's just got a pair of mat pins into which you tuck the line. The rod is held nice and securely for when you're fishing in windy weather by a John Roberts butt grip here. You just simply push the rod in there and there's nothing can move it. But on the end of the terminal tackle, very simple. It's just a ledgered half mackerel. I'm going to wind it in so you can have a look at it. Now, we've got a bit of weed on the bait. The fact that the bait's in the weed isn't a real problem, because on most of the waters I fish, the pike will happily dig it out of the weed. Just as a matter of course, we're going to going to take the weed off it, but the pike don't really mind. The bait we're actually using is just a common ordinary garden half a mackerel. A good friend of mine, Pete Hayward, has often sort of made a joking remark, which is pike fishing on a lot of waters is simply a case of banging out half a mackerel, and a lot of the time he's right. The actual rig that we're using is something I'm going to laughingly call a trace economiser. It isn't something you have to do, but this particular wire that we've got here, which is Kevlar coated wire, it's a bit in short supply. There isn't much of it left in the country now, so in order to make it go a bit further, what I've got here is a very short trace, which is the one that gets all knacked up by the pike's teeth, and then a larger piece here, which lasts forever virtually. It's a bit mean, but when the wire's as good as this stuff is, you can't afford to waste it by making long traces and then throwing it away when it's had it. Now, as we said, it's the half mackerel, which is a very effective and very easily obtained bait. It's also the ultimate casting bait. If you have to cast any distance on the water, cut halfway across like this, you can cast these 60 to 70 yards consistently. Anybody who can get better distances with that has either got superb technique or can't measure. Hooks are mounted, one in the tail root here to take the force of the casting. Both of these are size 8 semi-barbless treble hooks, and the other one is, you can put it anywhere you like, in the flank or anywhere like this. And the thing is, when a pike takes that, within 5 to 10 seconds of getting to the rod, you should, if you strike properly, hook the pike without any trouble. As I said, we've got a short trace. Whatever you do, do not just fish a trace that long. As I said, we've got a long lead-in trace here to cover all possibilities. The worst ones that you get with pike are pike that get the trace tangled around their heads and then get the line across their mouth. With a trace of this sort of length, that can't happen. And just to anchor it down on the bottom so you can tighten up to it, a couple of swan shot. When it's windy, I'll go up to 4, 5, 6, perhaps even 8. Pike are not particularly worried by lead on the line, and the secret of good bite indication is to tighten up to the bait, and the more lead you use, the easier it is. But today on this water, we've got no wind, we've got a lot of weed on the bottom, which means it's very easy to tighten down to the bait. And the Barkley snap link here, the cross lock, the reason we use those is because you can do a quick change of trace. I use this in every rig that I use for pike fishing, and that way I don't have to retie knots or mess about. Now the bait's now thawed out because we've been fishing with it, and for maximum distance when you're fishing with half mackerel, you could do with them frozen, but in this case we've only got to reach 40 or 50 yards to the drop off on this plateau. So what I'm going to do is a fairly casual cast. I'm going to whack it out there and see if something is interesting coming along. When we're fishing on these particular waters with a lot of weeds, we don't mess about. It's 18-pound line all the way through. That way you've got a lot of latitude for disasters like a fish getting in weed. Right, the bait takes about 10-15 seconds to sink. We just pull the bow out of the line, wind down until it won't move. I try and avoid pulling it too far to avoid pulling it right into the weed. It's tight now. Put it on there, a few bleeps, show that we are functional. With frozen fingers. Just pull it back and clip it in there. Now that line is now absolutely tight. There's very little latitude there for anything to happen unless it's a pike that causes it. On this rod we have the paternoster live bait. Very similar setup again. You must excuse my slightly Mickey Mouse way of fishing sometimes, but I fish to suit my own convenience rather than for the sake of the cameras. We've got the Centratron there again, and I'm just using a drop-off indicator. I'm not actually using it switched on, I'm just using it as an indicator. If, for example, it was very windy, this is much louder than the Centratrons, and I might decide to use these instead. But in this case, we're using the Centratron for the bite indication. Now, people have different views about live baiting. Mine are fairly simple. In order to catch pike, I have to live bait. If I've got a choice, I prefer dead baiting. It's a lot simpler, a lot less hassle, but on this particular water, we need live baits today to catch fish. Right, I'm going to wind it in to show you what we've got on the end. There's a lot of weed out there. We've actually found a bit of water where there's not too much weed, but I'm afraid as we bring it in, we're probably going to collect a load of weed on the bait. The trout that we've got on the end here was bred specifically to be eaten. I'm afraid to say that all I'm doing here is offering it to a pike. Now, there's many ways to float paternoster a live bait, and I've done just about all of them over the years, but the way I've got it set up here is, to my mind, the best way of all at the moment. The float you use is immaterial, really. It's a sunken float paternoster, and the stop knot is set about 8-9 feet, and then everything the float is actually sunken. Where pike are a bit naughty and attack things like this, they do sometimes attack brightly coloured objects, and you're better off with a black float. But for most situations, and particularly where occasionally I want to fish this on the surface as well as on a sunken rig, I like to have a conventional coloured float. The thing we've got here, which looks rather awful, and I always feel it is somewhat obtrusive and the pike can see it, is what we call a pike-safe paternoster boom. Used in conjunction with a very short Kevlar-coated wire trace, its design is such that it keeps the bait separate from the paternoster link, which we've got here, and on the end of the paternoster link we've got a 2-ounce bomb. And what it means is that there is no way that the bait can get to the reel line. As you see, if I hold it like this, no matter how it swims, it cannot reach the line. And that's why we use this particular boom. There are a lot of other ways of achieving the same sort of results, but I honestly believe that no other method is as effective as this. The obtrusiveness of the boom, pike can probably see it, is countered by the fact that you don't lose fish, and I'm prepared to accept that in order to avoid losing fish. The bait's mounted with one treble just under the dorsal root and one in the pectoral fin root. Now I'm going to cast this out again. I'm going to try and get beyond the weed line, which is about a 25-30 yard cast. And the beauty of the paternoster rig is that once I get it in that spot, it stays put there. And the other advantage of it is that a tethered bait has longer in the water in that area, so a pike can inspect it and make up his mind it's going to take it. It has disadvantages compared with free swimming methods or drifting methods, but on this water today, when it's as cold as what it is, I think we're better off with the paternoster. Fairly meaty cast required to get this to where we're going to go. Let's hope we don't cast the bait off. And finally, this rod's set up with a float ledger rig. Float ledgers, I think Bob's got to run again, but we'll press on regardless in the meantime. The float ledger rig is mainly used in situations where you want to keep the line off the bottom. For example, there are swims on this lake where there are quite big boulders and rocks near to where the bait is. So the float ledger helps keep the line out of trouble. We've actually got the buzzer is actually a ghetto blaster, and it's actually working this time. You must excuse the way I tie everything together with bits of string, but I seem to spend too much time fishing and not enough time maintaining my gear. It works. The line pulls out of the clip and it makes a terrible noise, which is enough to wake the dead. We'll switch it off. Very useful when you're fishing in windy conditions. Bob is well bent into something at the moment. He's winching something in. It could be a decent fish. Not coming in too quickly, but the trouble is when you get a 5 or 6 pounder in these sort of conditions, it can tend to just kite in and put a very healthy bend into your rod, but isn't actually anything worth worrying about. I think we're on the last 10 yards, yeah. It's not a big one, it's not a small one. Rather disappointing actually, because we should be getting bigger fish than this. We just don't know what the problem is. Yeah, but looks of it, that took the half mackerel. So Bob's had 2 runs, proper runs so far, missed a couple, and I haven't had a touch. Well, let's wind this in and show you what we've got here. I'm fishing with a dead trout on here. Well, I would normally actually prefer to be fishing a smelt, but smelt are very, very hard to come by at the moment, so we're having to economise and use dead trout, unfortunately. Again, everything's dead simple. Here we've got a standard sliding float. In this case, it's just a black poly ball. If you need to watch your floats, you use something with a fluorescent coloured top on it. An ounce bomb. These are very neat little things that are made by Marvick. They've actually got a piece of plastic tubing, rubber tubing through them, so that they don't damage the line, which can happen with some of the non-lead bombs you've got at the moment. And then 18-inch wire trace and a little dead trout hooked, one in the tail root and one in the side. The actual rig that we're using can be used as a sunken float ledger as well. At the moment it's fished over depth, so the float's on the surface, but in situations where there's very strong winds, it's very helpful to use it stopped, say only 5 or 6 feet above the bait, and that way your line is well down below where any sort of surface action can actually take effect on it. Well, what a contrast. Last time we were out on Whitestones Lake and it was bitterly cold, and in fact we had to abandon the whole thing in the end because of everywhere ended up frozen up. Now, still in December, we're on the mildest day we've had for some time. It's also blowing a gale, it's raining occasionally, but conditions are quite good for this lake. It's a very coloured lake, and one of the interesting things about coloured water is that generally live baits are a waste of time. It doesn't actually always work in reverse, so I can think of plenty of clear waters where dead baits outfish live baits, but in this particular situation live baits are generally a waste of time. I've caught very few good fish out of here on live bait. So we're going to approach this with just dead baiting tactics, at least I am. Bob Baldock's come along again to give me some help. I needed it last time because I didn't catch anything at all. But hopefully between us we'll be able to put some decent fish on the bank. There aren't many really big pike in this water. There could well be a 20, but we're hoping to get fish mid-doubles. We had only been set up for a few minutes when the first run occurred on the half mackerel. On this water, a lot of the fish tend to be very lightly hooked. So whenever possible, I will be landing my fish by hand. It is not recommended if you're inexperienced when loose hooks are flying around. Always carry a landing net that is large enough to accommodate the largest fish you might encounter. My net is 42-inch solid fiberglass arms, and you can get just about any pike you're likely to catch in that. Pike can be very easily unhooked if hooked properly. They often flap around, and when on my own, I find it easier to hold them like this. Zeroing weighing scales, very difficult. $15 a quarter, first run of the day. It's not bad, is it? Now you can see how coloured the water is here. Does this pike just disappear? I'm going to put it back. Whoops! I'm not supposed to do that. This is supposed to all be done in an organised manner. Here we are in luxury. Not everybody's idea of fishing, but on this lake you can get the car down to the side of the water, and because it's blowing a gale we've positioned the car in such a way so that I can sit here out of the wind and enjoying myself. Right, we've got to run on the half mackerel again. These fish in here, because the water's so coloured, tend to kite around quite a lot and they don't feel very big. Initially, whoops! I don't want to sound like John Wilson, but I'm afraid I just did a John Wilson. Actually, it's quite a powerful fish at the moment. It's shrunk again, I'm afraid. Yeah, the hooks are outside the net. I'm going to attempt to pick it out rather. It'll probably come off this one, Will, by the looks of it. It's only just hooked. Got it all right. Oh, and look where the half mackerel ended. Right, I think we'll take the bait from inside our clothing. That's quite a nice looking fish. It's had an experience with a propeller by the looks of it sometime in its past. See the great big mark there. You can see a leech here. That's typical of pike in cold weather conditions. You tend to get quite a few of these on pike. It might just make double figures. We'll give it a go, see what it weighs. Just made it 11. Right, we seem to be into a little bit of a hot feeding period here. I was just about to put a fish back, the 11 pounder we just had, and Bob's into one as well. But on this particular water, a lot of the action comes in spurts. You'll get nothing for 2 hours, and then suddenly all hell will let loose. It'll be chaos. We don't know why that is, but let's make the most of it. In the net. It's a very windy day. It's the sort of day when things go disastrously wrong very easy, like half your fishing tackle blows away. Yeah, it looks like a double anyway. We're not doing too badly. Right. How you doing, Bob? You're telling fibs, aren't you? It's a little bit out of control, this fish. Again, I mean, it's another fish with some peculiar marks on it. On its back here and a totally descaled area here. I mean, it could well be due to the boating that's done on. There's a lot of jet skiing and water skiers on here. They do get hit occasionally by boats. I mean, it's hardly fish, so it isn't down to angler damage. And they also tend to wolf the bait down quite quickly on here. But I don't think Bob will have any trouble with it. I mean, some people like to kneel down on the fish. Some people like to hold them up off the deck. I prefer to hold them up like the way Bob's doing at the moment. But unfortunately, the bigger they get, the harder it is to do this. Out it comes, and being the mean man that he is, he's got a reusable trout there. 13 and a half. Right, I would shake your hands, but I don't do that with people who catch fish next to me. Bob's just about to put his fish back. That was an unorthodox way of doing it. You can see that when the fish swims off how coloured the water is here, which accounts for why the pike are so light in colour. What just happened was quite interesting. Though I like to use electronic bite indicators, there's still quite a lot to be said for watching a float. And on one of these rods, I've got a float and no indication at all. I'm just actually sitting here watching it now. And the very simple poly ball floats, which are painted fluorescent red on one half and black on the other, if you watch them very carefully, you can actually see the very beginnings of a run, which is what happened just then. The float just tilted over and I could see quite a bit of the black of the float as it did so. And you know, you don't need buzzers and things like that if you're watching your tackle. The main reason you use buzzers is in situations where visibility of your float, because you're fishing at very long range, is not very good, or where you're not using a float at all. If, for example, it was a very windy day here and it was blowing down the lake, it would be far easier for presentation and bite indication to just fish a straight ledger. But today we've got the wind behind us, so there's no problem with that. Right, we've got what was a screaming run on here. It's slowed down a bit now. Ugh. That feels better. Shaking its head. We couldn't have picked a better day on this water, really. I mean, a freeze up followed by a really mild spell, and these pike generally feed like mad. I like to keep this spot baited up with dead baits, which helps to keep them in the area, but they do actually like this spot anyway. I mean, the best day I ever had in this particular swim, I had 9 doubles altogether, which is a hectic day's fishing. It wasn't even a day, it was just a morning before work. And the way things are going today, we could be approaching a similar sort of day. I think it's just about giving up now. Famous last words. Right, I think we'll go for the net this time. That's it. Anti-reverse on. Lift the lot up. Bit of wriggling about. If you keep the fish away from your body, it can't lever itself off your fingers. I like, as I said earlier, I prefer to keep them off the deck because if they're not in contact with anything, they can't come to any harm. We're doing a lot of weighing today. When there's 2 of you, it's a lot easier because you can get your mate to do this for you. But I fish on my own a lot, and I have to get used to doing it the hard way. Right, another 15. It wasn't the same one this time. This one's 15.5, and it's a different fish anyway. Right, we've got ourselves liberally covered in pike slime. A few little red marks on it, but Otherwise it's quite a nice looking fish. Again, very light in colour. Right, back. Dead baits are probably most anglers' main choice for pike baits. These days it's easy to get hold of a large range of dead baits. They're all ready frozen, and in order to keep them frozen we carry them in a freezer box. I'm not a great believer in over exotic baits, so what I'm going to show you here is a selection of the baits that catch the fish. In order to keep them frozen, we've got quite a few of these in here, which are freezer blocks. My favourite dead bait of all has always been the smelt. The simple reason is it's probably the most effective of the pike baits. It's got a lot going for it. I believe that in nature, pike recognise the smelt as being a very easily available food source, simply because in many waters, particularly rivers and waters connected to rivers, smelt run upstream during the spring to spawn, and many of them die and are very easy to pick up for pike. I believe it's instinctive, so that a pike can actually follow this behaviour pattern regardless of whether the water's connected to the river or not. It's something that's been passed on for millions of years. The big advantage of the smelt is that they're generally a very nice size. I mean, these are good ones, about 2 ounces, 2.5 ounces a piece, which means you've got plenty of casting weight, and you can pull the hooks out of the bait quite easily into the pike. Another bait that is universal in use is the mackerel. I mean, these are lovely little small ones. It's a little bit difficult, the small mackerel thing, because these aren't intentionally caught. These are generally a byproduct of fishing for larger mackerel. You don't need them this small. I generally use larger ones, which are in half baits. I've got one here, if we can find it. And that's about the usual size that I actually use, and I simply cut it in half. I mean, cutting it in half is not exactly a technical job. And one mackerel like that makes 2 baits. Nothing wrong with the heads at all. You catch just as many on the heads as you do the tails. These are all virtually frozen. Yeah, they're just a little bit soft. Very neglected bait, but one that will still catch just about anywhere, the herring. These are all blast frozen, very fresh, very silvery, absolutely perfect. Another bait which you don't miss many runs on herring. Some people like horse mackerel. I don't actually use them very much. I've had a few fish on them, but I think generally the mackerel is just as good, if not better. Very tough bait, quite good for wobbling. Coarse fish, well, generally you'll get these as a byproduct of hold on. Yeah, we're away. A line blowing everywhere in this wind. This one's on a smelt. Bend in. It's come up on the top and is having a bit of a swirl about. It's getting very dark now. I mean, it's only 1:45, but it's very dark now. when they shake their heads like this, they've often got the hooks right on the edge of their mouths. I mean, if it was a big fish, we'd obviously be going very, very carefully when you feel all this head shaking. But I don't think it's the end of the world if this drops off. Not a big fish. Yeah, you can see this. There you are, look, you've got the smelt hanging out the side of its mouth. We might get the bait back with a bit of luck. And then again, we might not. Oh, it's a beautifully lovely fat fish. Right. Let's just grab it. Very, very piggy fat fish. I'm going to need the forceps for this. You're going to lend me a pair, Bob? You won't get them back.
Oh well, I got them on a bit of string.
Ah, a piece of rubber. Actually, it'd be quite worth actually seeing how this is hooked, because this is how they really ought to be hooked all the time. It's quite possible to achieve good hooking like this on a regular basis, if you're lucky. Right, as you can see, I mean, that's exactly as we've just caught the fish, and that's more or less how you ought to hook them. I mean, there is one hook just in the roof of the mouth, and the other is actually free there. And when they're hooked like that, they're easy to unhook, as you'll see. That's it, simple as that. Very fat, nice looking little fish, about £6. I actually myself like to weigh anything that I think is over double figures, but anything like the one we've just caught, we put straight back. I mean, it's not critical whether it weighs £6 or whether it weighs £7, but I like to know if I've had a double figure fish. It's part of the enjoyment to me. As I was saying before I was so rudely interrupted, coarse fish baits, generally, in many people's cases, they're dead live baits, but you can actually buy them now, and they're very good quality. These are rudd. Very underrated bait, actually, coarse fish baits. I mean, it is, in a way, the most natural baits of the lot. Another favourite of mine in certain situations is the sand eel. And these are real beauts, these are. Great big ones. Plenty of casting weight. If you miss a run on a sand eel, you must be completely out of your mind. It's very difficult to miss runs on these. I've found them to be very effective on certain fend and drains. Done very well. I've had fish to just over 20 on sand eels when I've been fishing smelt on the other rod, which is quite a surprise. And there are a few other things, very small herrings like these ones. And we did have some trout in here, but certain Mr. Baldock has used them all. They're all gone. Don't let a Baldock in your freezer box. Eel sections, I don't use them for pike very much. They are a good pike bait. I prefer to use them for zander fishing. I've had a few decent pike on eel sections. For all of my pike fishing, I use the same rods these days. In the old days, we used to have to use different types of rods for different jobs. Particularly for dead baiting, you'd use a slow action 2 3/4 to 3 pound test rod, and for casting very small dead baits on big leads, you use a fast taper rod. But these days, you seem to be able to do everything with the same rods. This one's a 12-foot Daiwa 612 E-Sox, which is a 2.5 pound test curve rod with my name on it. It'll handle any situation that you're likely to encounter in pike fishing. It's good with live baits, it's good with dead baits, it's good distance fishing, good fishing close in. There's nothing that they won't do effectively. The actual action of the rod these days is mainly in the top section, as you can see. But there's plenty of backbone in it, so that you can actually handle baits on a long cast up to about 4 ounces, and for generally lobbing baits, such as say a 6 to 8 ounce live bait, you can do it with these all right. I mean, I don't actually use baits over about 4 ounces anyway, but if you wanted to, you could. One of the most obvious and neglected aspects of pike fishing is the simple act of casting out. To put it simply, the aim of casting out when you're pike fishing is to get the bait to where you want it without it coming off the hooks, which is the problem particularly when you're live baiting. And there's various ways of making it easier not to lose your bait when you're casting, but the most fundamental thing is to actually don't cast anything that you've got on harder than what it will withstand. And then there's people who've fishing at long distances, you require perhaps a little bit more technique. I mean, I'm not the world's greatest caster, and I don't profess to be, but I can usually get the baits to where I want them. Well, this is only a very small bait here, but the key to when you're fishing small baits is to use plenty of lead, plenty of weight. I mean, there's an ounce bullet on there. This is one of these Marvick ones with a piece of rubber tubing through the middle, which is quite a good idea because it stops wear on the line. And all you do then is, you know roughly where you're going to cast, which is we're going to aim for about 40 yards out there. You took the bail arm off, and if you're going to do a modest cast, all you do is you push forward with that hand and just hold the butt. If you're going for real distance, right, and you're trying to do a long distance cast, you'll start a bit further back out of camera, and you'll push really hard down on this and push forward with this. So this small bait is just going to go about 40 yards out there. If we were using half a mackerel, if we got that 40 yards, then the half mackerel could easily be put 20 yards further with good technique and a backwind, 80 yards. With a bit of luck and a miracle, 100 yards. But I've never done a 100-yard cast with a half mackerel, or spent some time actually measuring, and 80 yards is pushing it. When striking, I always wind down until the fish is felt. Then normally, all that is needed is a controlled pull into the pike. Theoretically, if you're going to pick them out by hand, you ought to wait until they calm down a bit. You only do this normally when the hooks are outside the mouth, and if you've got confidence and you're not scared of the actual pike. Now this one is actually taking the bait down a little bit further than what you'd want. I'm just going to show you how easy it is to actually take the hooks out. If you look there, you can see that one hook is in the side of the mouth and one is at the top of the gut, right? Well, these are semi-barbless treble hooks. And if we go in here through the gill cover, and we grab hold of the hook like that and just turn it upside down, and that's it. Very easy. Just take that because it's just lodged just there. Right, and that's it. Out the hooks come. Easy. Bit of a long fin fish, might make double figures, I doubt it. Let's just find out. Well, we're at the end of the day. We've had quite a good day's sport. We've had several double figure fish. But really on this particular water, we can't really hope to catch fish much above 20 pounds. There aren't many fish like that in this water. It's mainly a doubles water. But never mind that, we've had some action, and the next sequence we're going to show you, we're going to be on a southern trout water, and there we hope to catch some bigger fish. Well, I've survived the first morning here on this cold December morning. The fishing hasn't been all that bad actually. I've had a 17-12 and a small pike. But what I'm going to do now is take you through the essentials of pike fishing on this type of water. Now, the most obvious essential is a boat, and I'm standing in one here now. This is an Orkney spinner, a 13-foot fiberglass built boat. It's a boat that you can take virtually anywhere on waters up to even the size of the Scottish locks. This one here today I've had to hire, unfortunately, though I've got one of my own that I keep elsewhere. Now there's a few items of kit that I've had to bring with me, obviously. This is an electric trolling motor. This one's the Minn Kota 3 horsepower. The beauty of this particular model is it has a thing called a maximizer, which allows you to use it at any throttle setting, forward or reverse. In that way you can fish in any amount of waves or any conditions. To power it, you need a pretty large battery. You're supposed to use caravan or deep cycle batteries. I've found that I can get away quite nicely with this very large starter motor battery. Once you've got that battery in the boat, you can use it to power all the other things that require electricity. For example, you have the Humminbird TCR ID1, which we use for locating fish and also for finding the depths. And also we have an aerator to keep the live bait alive, and as you can see here, they're quite happily swimming around in the bucket there. When you're trolling you don't normally need an anchor, but there are situations where an anchor can be very useful. For example, if you've hooked a big fish in a strong wind, you'll find it very difficult to get that fish close to the boat to net. So you need an anchor that will hold out in those conditions. Now this anchor here is a bit of a beast of a thing, but it does the job. As you can see, it's got these large metal spikes and it's backed up, most importantly, by this great big lump of cast iron. Now this anchor will hold out just about anywhere. I've never had it drag once. The only trouble with it is that you develop muscles like Desperate Dan lifting it in and out of the boat. When we caught the 17-12 earlier, it was obvious to anybody who was watching that things don't always go according to plan. It's not very often that I get a pike that decides to get its teeth in the landing net just as I'm about to net it. But despite that, we managed to get the fish in the net and safely secured. Things like that do go wrong occasionally, but when you actually come to the point of getting the pike into the boat, you've got to try and avoid things going wrong then, because that's when the fish gets damaged. You'll have seen that that fish didn't put up much of a fight, but when it got into the boat, it was a different situation. It was a rather lively fish, and if there hadn't been sufficient protection on the bottom of the boat, that fish would have got damaged. And that's why we've got a substantial amount of padding in the bottom of this boat. We've got a weighing sling on top of carpeting, which is all wet, and the fish can slide about as much as it like without coming to any harm.
My preferred method on this particular water is something I call slow trolling. Now in Ireland, when you're trolling, you use a petrol motor. But on this particular water, you need to present the bait slowly. This you can't do with a petrol motor, but you can do it with an electric motor. Now, the advantage of the electric trolling motor is that you have unlimited control with it. You can present the bait as slow as you like. What I'm doing here with the slow trolling method is using nothing at all except a 1 ounce bullet on the line. And using a stop knot set at about 25 feet, I pay the line out until the stop knot is just above the water. I therefore know that my bait is fishing at 25 feet. This is provided the line is vertical from the rod tip to the water. If I go too fast, the angle increases.
This is a very funny looking fish, that one. Right, we've got ourselves organised in the boat. Still jumping about a bit, we're going to lift it in. The trouble with these fish is they're not fighting very hard at the moment in the water because it's so cold. But when they come out, the boat starts bouncing back. another 17 pound that goes back. Again, hands are very cold now, very difficult to hold on. Whoops, off she goes. No bye-byes at all there. Because of the small size of the bait available at the moment, you buy them on the reservoir itself. I'm using 2 in tandem. The reason for doing this is to make the bait appear bigger. The actual hooking of the pike is very easy on small baits like this, far easier than using one bait at the same size as 2 of them together. You'll see that we're fishing 2 quite large treble hooks. This again is very useful when you're using quite large trout baits. They're size 4s, they're semi-barbless, and we've got a long Kevlar coated wire trace, and the terminal tackle is very simple really. You've just got a Berkeley snap link there and a 1-ounce bullet sliding on the line. Very simple. Just swing them over the side, and you don't just allow it to drop down because you risk getting a tangle. What you do is you accelerate on the motor and you pay the line out. The stop knot goes up through the rings until we reach the desired depth, and we're fishing at about 18 feet at the moment. We've decided to fish a bit shallower than what we were doing earlier. Anti-reverse on, bait runner off. We're fishing.
Sonars such as the Hummingbird are essential when fishing waters like this. There are a number of things they can do for you. The most important is depth. It tells you what depth you're fishing in. But it'll also show up structure on the bottom, it'll show up weed beds, and of course it'll show up fish. Sometimes it'll show up individual pike, but most useful is it'll show you where the food fish shoals are, which can, not always, but can sometimes lead you to where the pike are. To make it even easier, you've got a number of functions which you can use. One is you can stop the screen and look more closely at what you've got there. You can also use a fish alarm which tells you when you're going over fish. This is particularly useful when you're not looking at the screen. It also has a zoom function, which means you can zoom on a particular part of the water column and look more closely.
Bite indication in this sort of fishing is simplicity itself. When the pike takes the bait, what we want to happen is it to feel only a small amount of resistance. We want it to be able to take line so that it can actually turn the bait very quickly, and in that time I'm going to get up and strike. The reel that I have here is a Daiwa Bite and Run. There's 3 other companies that do similar reels. The key thing about them is they have a bait runner function. This means that at the moment it's just like a normal reel. As soon as you take the bait runner off, you can pull line off like that. There's another knob underneath here which you can adjust the tension for that, so you can have the line easily pulled off or much more difficult to pull off. And this is set just right so that the bait can't pull any line off, but any pike that takes will be able to take line. And as soon as I get a take, what I will do is I will open the bail arm, let the line run out, pick the rod up, and then wind down and strike. And this comes off automatically. In order to enable me to fish a bait at a predetermined depth, I need some way of knowing how much line I've got out. The simplest way is to use a standard sliding stop knot fixed on the line. In this case, the stop knot is set at 23 feet. When the stop knot hits the end of the rod, I know I've got 23 feet of line out. You can make the stop knot out of just standard reel line or power gum. Well, back on dry land, it's time perhaps to reflect on what's happened today. Just a little while ago, we caught the fish that we were hoping to get. We had a 21 pounder. Only a few short moments before that, I was really beginning to despair. But fortunately, the change in method that we'd decided on, which was a float troll bait as opposed to the slow trolled method, produced the goods. It came out of the blue, as is so often the case with the best fish of the day. I was just turning the boat and the float was bobbing along merrily behind me. Next thing I knew, it was gone. Just zoomed off under the water. A few seconds to get everything organised and then strike. And it was the best thing that had happened all morning. Picking the rod up and hitting it fairly quickly. It bent well into it, and I soon realised that I had a decent fish on. But the main problem that we were having at the time was that the wind had just started to get up. It was pushing me well away from the fish. My hands were very cold, so I could hardly hold on to the handle of the reel. So it was all a little bit Mickey Mouse in some ways, but we managed to get the fish up on the top, and it was fighting quite well until it came up on the top. Then it, after just a couple of dashes around, it gave up the ghost. Once in the boat, it was clear that this fish was suffering from what's known as red sore disease. It is not a fatal disease generally, but it does leave an unsightly mark on the side of the fish. And this unfortunate fish had two rather red, nasty marks on each side of its body. A shame, because otherwise it was a beautiful fish. Now, because I was pretty frozen stiff by this time, once the fish was in the net, the best thing to do really was, once it was unhooked, was to get to the shore. On this day, we weren't very far away from the shore, so it's quite acceptable to do that. However, in the summer, or in the early months of the autumn, when the water temperature is still high, it is not a very good idea to go driving to banks to take your photographs. You're much better off dealing with the fish in the boat and getting it back straight away. Now, previously we'd been using the slow trolling method, which is a very simple method which requires no float. Things have developed in an unexpected way, in that the pike here have unusually decided to spend more time up off the bottom than they would normally do. So what I've decided to do is try fishing with a float trolling rig. This incorporates a float in addition to the usual end tackle that we were using for the slow trolling. We've still got the large bullet to get the bait well down, but now we've got what I affectionately call my shark float. This is a excessively large float, but there is a perfectly valid reason for it. The reason you use this big float is because you can actually use a very heavy weight, this is 1.5 ounces, to get the bait down. And the other reason for this is that you don't have to use any fancy methods of locking the float on the line. The bait will stay down where you want it. The rest is just the same as before, Berkeley snap link and a Kevlar coated wire trace and 2 size 6 trebles. The stop knot is the same as before, a standard sliding float stop knot. It's set in this case at about 19 to 20 feet. The aim is always, when you're float trolling, to fish 3 or 4 feet over depth, and then as you're moving along, the float tends to angle away and lift the bait off the bottom so that your bait's just off the bottom. The beauty of the float trolling rig is that you don't have to pay quite so much attention to it as you do the slow trolling rig. simply because you can actually fish on a slack line, not be in complete touch with the bait, yet the bait is still fishing. With the slow trolling rig, if you do that, you end up on the bottom and snagged up, which obviously isn't what we would aim to do. Bow Beach Reservoir, a name that few people had heard of 2 weeks ago. Things have changed a lot since then. This water has produced fish to 40.5 pounds in the initial week's fishing. And I'm here today, not with hopes of fish as big as that, but hopefully something to excite the audience of the video. We're drifting along at the moment on this reservoir, using a drogue to slow us down. We're float trolling again, and the water is a very peculiar colour. It's almost a milky sort of white green. We don't know how that will affect the pike fishing today. It's supposedly getting clearer, but hopefully this boat will get a take off something and we'll be able to show you some action. Over there you can see Derek Amies and his companion trolling for pike on Bow Beach. Derek is one of the few anglers who've actually caught 2 40-pound plus pike, something that I don't think I shall be attaining in my lifetime.
Graham and David are two anglers who have just caught this fantastic Bow Beach fish. They've been fishing the other reservoir at the same time as myself, with very poor results. They were not doing anything wrong. They were fishing in a sensible manner, but I was lucky and caught some good fish, and they were not. Today, the roles are reversed, and Graham has caught a 31.25 pound pike using exactly the same methods he's been using all week. This just goes to show something that I've always believed. That is, provided the method's right, it's all down to luck really. All I need is a bit of luck myself. The question is, have I used it up already?
Okay. Yeah.
I think that is across the back.
Like a break.
It's 1:15 and we're still here on Bow Beach. Things have gone from bad to worse. A series of accidents have befell me, and at one stage I was feeling very annoyed with life. The main problem was the drogue that we were drifting with so effectively came untied mysteriously. Whether this is sabotage by somebody or just plain incompetence on my part, I've no idea. Either way, we're now having to resort to the dreaded rowing method because the electric trolling motor can't be used on this water for trolling. Things haven't been bad for everybody. There's been another good fish caught, a 26.6. But here is just endless disasters. Going ashore to photograph the 31, we've filled the boat up with sticky mud, so we're now slipping and sliding all over the place. The boat's not quite balanced right because it's set up for trolling with the electric motor. And I've got a cameraman in the back who weighs a ton.
Despite all the misfortunes that had befallen us, my luck hadn't deserted me. But at first, I thought the fish I'd hooked was only small.
We've got something on. Doesn't feel very big though. It's coming up too easily. Oh God. I wish it wouldn't do that. Oh. We thought it was the bottom when we got the take. It took a lot of convincing to make me think it was a fish, but it was. It was on the floatless tackle bumped just off the bottom. Right, the moment of truth, we're going to get some idea how big this fish really is when I have to lift it in. It is big. It's just got wrapped up in the net a bit. Oh, crikey. Oh. 24 and a quarter, I would say. Fantastic looking trout water fish. Look at the shape of that. I'm a lucky man today. I'm very pleased. Very pleased indeed. It decided to go on its own. Half an hour ago, I had my first pike from Bow Beach. You can't really expect to catch much from a water on your first visit. So when I had this fish, which was 24 and a quarter, I was very pleased. A lot of good anglers have put a lot of time in on that water and have caught very little, so I've been very, very lucky indeed. The actual catching of the fish was fairly elementary really. I mean, we'd been trolling around most of the day, and as luck would have it, when we were over about 27 feet of water, it took the trout, and you often think when you're actually trolling after a long period of time and you've had nothing, the next take that actually comes, you always think it's a snag or it's you're stuck on the bottom or something. It's funny how your mind adjusts to the situation. But it was a fish. It actually put the wind up me a bit when it came up on the top, because everybody else has been catching 30-pounders from Bow Beach, and as soon as I saw it, I thought, hello, this is mine. It shrunk slightly on the way to the net. It jumped out of the water a couple of times.
and it still looked to me like a big fish. When we got it in, it wasn't quite so big, but I was very happy about it, just the same. And to coin a rather boring football cliche, I went from being sick as a parrot to being over the moon. Terrible, isn't it?